All right. So with my good buddy Ken Salaz.
There you go.
Ah, man, I always get on the second shot. And today we're going to talk about textures in oil painting. We've had many conversations. We want to kind of loop everyone in on them. Is that we're always looking for. I call it. I always say this cheesy thing to all my students, which is variety is the spice of life. So I'm always one thing I'm joking about all the time is just, or not even joking, I'm pretty serious actually, is that when creating a painting, you want to have a variety of textures. Just like eating too, it's kind of like you don't want to have just a big plate of potatoes. So I'm always advocating for depth in the work, underpaintings, using the underpainting as a way to shine through, but also building textures. So figured we'd talk about that today. And so talk to me about how do you start thinking about textures?
In landscapes, it's super important. I mean, as it is with still life, because we're painting. If you want to create a landscape and paint it so the viewer feels the surf of the ocean, smells the trees, and experiences the cragginess and the harshness of the rocks on the dirt, like when you're walking, and if you want the viewer to capture that and get that full sensory experience out of a painting,
right?
Then I feel you need to really expand and take advantage of the different textural capacities of paint and patterns. But let's talk about texture, so that the way the texture or the underpainting in relation to the second or third passes of water gives the sense of fluidity, transparency, illuminated by light. Whereas over here in this section of the painting, the light's hitting a rock and it's immobile. It's been there for hundreds of thousands of years, and if you tapped it, your knuckles would get scraped, right?
Yeah.
And so how do you get that impression, that sensory impression, to a viewer through paint? And
it's like
the way to go.
Trying to get like a visceral response.
Yeah.
Like how do you get some response where they feel the weight of the rock and they feel the texture of the tree, but it's something different. It actually reminds me of a quote. I think it was Dean Cornwell. It's either Dean Cornwell or Harvey Dunn, and they were illustrators back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s who studied with Howard Pyle. And I think it was Cornwell or Dunn. And what they said was paint the smells, and paint the sensory. Don't remember that and paint that in your painting. So I think it brings another element to it where we're trying to get this tactile sensation that you're there, which is just different. I think you could bring photography into it as like painting from photos. You're not going to get that sensory response. You're not remembering much from the experience that you were there.
Right.
I think that's what we're tapping into, right?
Absolutely, and that's when I paint. I've been doing a lot of water's edges with sand going into water with this whole Walden Pond series, and in my mind, when you go to Walden, Todd, you just want to dive in that water. I mean, I was in clothing and I had my backpack and all painting, but you just want to jump in the water. It's like so gorgeous, and that was like the overwhelming feeling. So how do I paint it to make the viewer that's standing here and want to jump in that water in the painting?
Yeah, is that Concord, Mass?
That's just below Concord. Yeah, it's right in that whole area.
Is it Lexington or?
It's right. There's Concord and there's Walden.
Oh, okay.
It's right there.
Oh, Walden is a city. Oh, cool.
No, I don't know. Actually, I don't know if it's just Walden Pond.
I know all the so you're tapping into the idea of like the transcendentalists, which I know you write about in your book. Which is awesome. Emerson, Thoreau, Walden. I'm sure there's a few more that I'm leaving out, right?
Those are the big ones. Whitman.
Walt Whitman, right?
Oh yeah, you said Walt. Did you say Walt?
Oh no, I didn't.
Okay.
Well, there is what's interesting.
There's a lot of them. There's a few of them, but
there's Edward Simmons too, who was an impressionist, and he wrote a book called From 7 to 70, and it's his recanting growing up in Concord, talking to Hawthorne and these guys, and it's pretty fantastic.
Wow.
I just started reading it, and but it's a cool book, and put out by like Dover or something. So
7 to 70.
Yeah.
So the text. So going to the painting, and getting texture with the water on the edge. You've got a few textures happening. You've got the sandy meeting semi-wet sandy with the water, and then you've got transparent water lapping over it.
Yeah.
So you've got like transparent water wet sand, and then dry sand with rocks.
Fascinating.
You see, so when I paint those sections, I ask myself, what kind of texture do I want to create in the dry sand area,
Yeah.
the wet sand area, and now under the water, and how many passes is each going to take, and what kind of passes,
Totally, yeah. So you're almost like thinking almost like a good chess player, like 5 steps ahead.
Yeah.
So your first layer is like the setup to then come back and layer something over the top.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's awesome.
And sorry to interrupt, but funny enough, there's 2 goals on that little section of painting, which is to get someone to want to stick their foot in the water. Like, I really want them to like literally put their foot up on the painting.
Yeah.
And the second thing is if I can get them to hear the waves, like how the waves like just lap over on the edge. If I get those 2 things, then I think I nailed it.
It's fascinating. It's extremely difficult thing to do because I related to still life, so I'm like the still life guy. You're like the landscape guy, and it's like for me, it's like everything is stagnant, nothing's moving. But you're painting like rushing water, waves that are crashing and coming in and out, and you're trying to put this concept of like texture and difference of feeling, movement. And I mean, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, how to paint movement.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do you paint movement? And this is a good place where the departure from photography works. I feel the advantage of not painting from a photograph on moving water and stuff because, I studied photography when I was at Cooper Union. That was one of the major things I did, classes I took over and over. But with painting, there's techniques in glazing, sometimes scumbling, different things you do to get textures that will visually tell your mind this is moving water.
Yeah.
It just, so if you were to cut a square out of a section of a painting of moving water and you would say to somebody, is this a rock, a tree, or moving water? They say, well, that's moving water because of the texture of it and the pattern that's within that little square.
Right, and probably the edges too, where they're softer.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Right.
Where the edges, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. So you're thinking about edges, you're thinking about texture, you're thinking about
Patterns.
layering.
Yeah.
Well, it's awesome because, as a teacher, it's one of the things I'm trying to get across to is like, it's not like I just go and I paint the thing and then I walk away. I think it could be one of the things that I'm not a huge fan. I do love alla prima, but one of the things about alla prima that you're missing is just this sense of like depth, which is why looking at paintings on a monitor is different from looking at them in life.
Mm-hmm.
In life, you're getting this sense of like light, you're getting the transparency of the film, because we're painting, it dries to a film. So you get that quality of like, you can add a medium, you can paint it thin, you can paint it thick. And that interaction of the viewer, I think with it is what you don't get. You do get an interaction of obviously a screen, but it's more of like looking through like film. Mm-hmm. Light's coming through the back where light's actually hitting off the surface and going through layers when we look at a painting.
Yeah, I love what you said earlier. We were talking earlier about how the painting will look different from depending where you are in the room.
Yeah.
Because one area of the room, the light's coming in and reflecting through. Another area, it isn't. And actually, the painting moves. It changes as you look at different angles.
Absolutely.
Which I love that.
It actually reminds me of those. Did you ever see the Hans Holbein? Have you gone to the National Portrait Gallery in London?
Yeah.
The Hans Holbein, where you'd have look at it from the corner and you'd see the skull elongated.
Yeah.
When you walk around, you see it from the front. There's the 2 guys. I forget the name of it.
Yeah.
There definitely is that human interaction, I think, with painting, which makes it interesting. And funny enough, Howard, who shoots our work, or he hires a photographer, always has trouble with mine. He's like, you have so much texture in your work. And I'm like, yeah, I want it. I'm actually playing with the idea. Like when I used to go and look at the museum, paintings in museums, there was always just this symphony of textures and non-textures. And I think it made it so that I could look at an area and then have a passive area. Mm-hmm. Cam used to talk about this all the time. Like have an area and then we come into it and then you have a beautiful moment. But music is so good because what builds up to it, which is not like boom, 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 boom. It's the pause before the big. So you want to add to that or?
No, I think, man, we're moving into another area. But I guess, no, it's the same. It's similar.
We can go back.
No, it's actually, it's the same thing because when you talk about a pause and then into a movement and then back out, the same thing happens when you're doing different textures and patterns on a painting. You can lead the eye. This is so cool. Now we're into composition, Todd.
Yeah,
Now we're
yeah.
talking about,
I love composition.
I know
That's my favorite.
well, that and light quality. As a landscape, I just love the light quality. But you can lead the eye through a painting by the controlling of the textures of in yours, how you arrange everything.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, how textured or how patterned I want an area to be, and how that transitions into a less textured, less patterned, and that you can control the viewer's eye by doing that, and the transitions between the two, and how two textures come against each other, act as, you can look at it as value, high contrast value or low contrast value.
Mm-hmm.
It's high texture, low texture. Like the edge, it's the same as manipulating value. But I feel it's so much more subtler. It's subtler. But that's my response about moving in.
I think it's something that I think when we think of like paint handling as like painting, it's such a small component of it. I think there's the mastery of the medium, and then there's the like, what is the chef going to do now with the dish, and let me surprise you. One thing I remember I took like an online class, and I was just taking like a composition class to see what they were going to teach, and then I think I showed one of my still lifes, and I just remember the teacher. This is where it's like the funny thing about rules, and just like everyone's always breaking them. So his whole thing was that I put all this texture in the background, but it's because the objects were passive. I wanted to be like, here's a simple bowl. I don't want to have a bunch of texture in it, it's ceramic. But I'm going to contrast that in the background, right? So contrast is actually what makes things interesting, which is what you're saying with high contrast, low contrast. Mm-hmm. I think there's contrast of textures versus smooth surfaces too, which you were talking about. And he was like, typically we tell people not to do this, but it works. So I think it's almost like, you want to use the rules, but not be used by the rules.
Yeah.
So you take that and then you think about it and you say, let me give a nice symphony of textures and colors, and I'm going to balance them, which is, I think, what we're always doing. What you're doing in nature is like, you're composing your picture and pulling everything from what you see, your visceral experience, to make your painting. Mm-hmm. But you're not putting every single element, because if we focused, you'd see every little leaf.
You see every little leaf, yeah. No, it's important to remember that we are we're composing a work of art that is inspired by nature and our experience as living beings, right? It's not, we're composing a painting that shows us nature.
Yeah.
It's different. It's a different internal mentality to say, I'm painting nature, it's inspiring, and my experience of nature, and that's what the painting, the mingle of those two. And that's where I think, the poetic realism comes out of it. It's like real. You're there. There's the texture. There's the wood of the box you just painted. There it is. In fact, if I run my hand down, I'm gonna get a splinter. That's how it feels, right? But it's not just the literal box. It's where that box has been.
Right.
What has it held over the years? All the fascinating narrative things that you can put in your still lifes, right? When you look at, wow, I get a splinter, but is that someone's heirloom? Or you look at it like, so was it on a ship for years?
Yeah, no, for sure.
All this cool stuff,
Yeah, no, I love that too. When I a lot of the objects in my still lifes come from something deep, and I know that I got this box that I painted pretty much almost like all the award-winning paintings have been painted on that one box for good or bad. But that was actually from Gina's grandmother, who was a painter in the 70s. And they were like getting rid of the box, and they were like, it's got paints in them. Would you like them? I said, of course I would. So it's almost like, in a weird way, she kind of lives on, but there's some spirit or something in it that made it richer. And then there was a deep desire to make something good with it. So it wasn't like, I didn't go to home decor or, whatever, Christmas tree shop and buy some cheap version of it. It was like, this was a thing that was lived in. Yeah. And I think, I think it's, when it comes to painting boxes and stuff, I use the information I see up in front of me. as a guide, but I'm never trompe-l'oeing it. I'm not like, I see that little green spot and I have to put it here. I give this idea of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I never copy it, which is, I think it surprises a lot of people.
Yeah.
Where they're like, I don't see you doing what I see. And I'm like, no, it's a guide.
It's a guide. This is important. So if you go, translated to landscape painting, if you go, anybody in their mind right now, go to some morning, you're out on the lake or you're on a river or on a stream, and it's early morning, you have your hot cocoa there and breathe in, and what do they say? Just taking in the moment, like all this, right? So what you're doing as an experience of nature is taking an entirety of the moment of nature, all the sensual experiences and emotional experiences of it, right?
Right.
That's what I'm painting.
Right.
Imagine if you were in this state of like, it's a bit chilly, but I'm loving it, and someone to say, look at every twig on that tree, look at every blade of grass, stare at it, stare at every, like, stop that, I'm taking in the whole thing.
Right.
You wouldn't, as a human being, have this amazing experience and oh no, I should be looking at every detail.
Right.
Well, for me, from my approach to painting, and don't want people to look at every detail. In fact, they're not all going to be there because I want them to have that standing at the river in the morning experience. That's more important than all the twigs. And I'm not saying there aren't, I'm a huge fan of Andy Wyeth, right? Andrew Wyeth. Mm-hmm. He does a lot of twigs and a lot of, and I love it. But that was his way of getting that moment.
He was like egg tempera.
Yeah, but it's a different medium, and he took it as far as he felt to give me the experience of like, I really feel that the window blowing the
brandy wine.
Yeah, I feel that grass. He went all the way with the details and still did it. So,
and here's the thing I think is that, it's funny because you probably get this all the time when people look at your work and go, your work looks like a photo, and we're just like, it's not really. I think what you're trying to...
I'm like, damn, I could have saved 100 hours.
I know, I should have just printed it out and pasted it on canvas. But I think what they're trying to say is that it has a sense of life to it. And that's what we're trying to capture. And I think, when I look at your work up close and personal, it's not, you didn't paint everything. You left a lot out. But there are moments where there is stuff in there. And you kind of force the eye to go to it. I think we look for detail. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something misunderstood where I don't think enough people are looking at like masters, like even Bouguereau. When I go look, I spent a lot of time at the Nilsen Sater painting at the Clark Museum. Mm-hmm. And I was like, captivated by all the nymphs in that one satyr being kind of pulled into the water. Mm-hmm. But if you look around it, it looks like he painted every blade of grass, but he didn't.
He didn't.
Very almost like impressionist.
Yeah. What's one of my favorite paintings is, by the way. Yeah. You'll see these large, probably this big, of just dark brown or dark greenish brown.
And it's like big brush.
Yeah.
Just went in there and you see this scrape quickly of texture.
And
so he's a good balance of that.
He's got a great balance. Yeah. He's got a great balance of it. Yeah. Absolutely.
I think there was like some I guess, I don't know if it's like photography came and took it away because it became easier to just say like, well, I don't have to, I don't have to be passive about an area or two because I don't know what is there. I can now put in every detail because I see it.
Right.
And we're moving towards like high def and 4K and all this stuff. And it's like, it's going to be like seeing pores. And I think that's where kind of hyper-realism is taking over. But I don't think, when you and I talk and I look at who you're inspired by and who I'm inspired by, it's like we're looking back at the ones that pre-photography or at the beginning of photography. Yeah. It hadn't dominated so much. So
well, the idea. I mean, this is another discussion, but the idea of painting leading the viewer's mind to the surface of things, or to the meanings of things.
Right.
That's the question.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And I want to lead people's minds to the meanings of the things in the painting, not their surfaces. Hey, if the surface helps me get them to the meaning, I'll paint it as far as I can.
Yeah. It's interesting.
It's not the end result.
There's a book by Joseph Campbell, and I think it's called Symbol Without Meaning. And I feel like there's a lot of that going on right now where like you were talking about the double cross upside down and and I think it's a compositional tool and it's very deep and
Thomas Cole
had put it in, but he knew what he was doing and why he was doing it because it was almost like taking a cheap shot at Western culture.
Yeah, well, it's in the book. It's in my book. Landscapes in Oil, I discuss composition and his use in one area, putting an inverted cross and columns. So you have this one major pillar, and then these smaller columns underneath inverted, which makes an inverted cross. So it's the decadence of the civilization, where it founded in one direction, and now it's reversed.
Yeah, and you were talking, I think I was kind of listening to one of your lectures, and you were talking about St. Peter was crucified upside down.
Yeah, exactly. So
upside down cross is like a symbol that comes through, but if you just put it upside down in a painting, you didn't know what it meant, you could have it, but it would be the symbol without the meaning.
It would be the symbol without the meaning. Right. Yeah, exactly. It's got to work within the whole context of the meaning and the idea of the painting, which is, I mean, when I talk about composition in my book, I go, the idea determines the composition. The vision, the main idea.
Begins with it.
It is, everything is determined in a composition by the idea of the painting.
Right.
And if it's an inverted cross, a cross that's regular, if it's on its side, I mean, you could do whatever, but it's got to get across the idea of the painting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's super important to talk about too.
Which is great to talk to Cami about. Because I work with her, I live with her, and she works through her paintings, and we'll talk about them. And the amount of thought that she puts into each element and what it has to do and how it supports the main idea is wild. She really goes on to it. It's phenomenal,
Awesome.
Yeah.
So let's talk quickly about, we're talking about textures in paint, and we kind of drifted off a little bit there about meaning, which is always awesome.
We started talking about water and then we drifted off.
Yeah, man, crashing and burning. But so to create textures in paint, how is it that you think about it? Are you thinking about it with like different brushes? Or do you think about it with like different mediums? I know how I think about it. I'd love to hear.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, so
different brushes and different mediums. And so there's the paint, there's the applicator, meaning the brush. Mm-hmm. And then there's the medium you work with. So there's pretty much three things are going into every brush stroke. Every time you put something on there, it's a trinity. Right. Pretty awesome. Yeah, there you go, man. Very, very profound. Every moment of painting is actually very deep.
Totally.
So you're putting a trinity on the paint on the canvas every time you touch it. So the texture comes from the quality of the paint, what you're painting with the brush, and whatever mediums you're using. Right. Now, the quality of the paint is determined right out of the tube, pretty much standard, right? Even though there's certain variations, but that's why I use Michael Harding, because it's so darn consistent.
Right. Well, his consistency is awesome. I think it was Ralph Mayer that said that consistency should paint, which can vary depending on manufacturer, is buttery, I think. So he's got like the right.
He's got it right in the middle, man. Every tube is the same consistency, which I love because I don't have to like do gymnastics to get the consistency the way I want it on the canvas.
So you're working with Michael Harding now?
Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, it's the transparent colors are incredible. They hold their chroma even though they're thinned out, or and then the ones that are opaque don't lose. They don't. Sometimes paints get dead when they dry. Right. And they don't. They hold up. So I've been using them. Let's go on to textures. So the you can cut right there, and we can start right here. Yeah. Okay. So the applicator, the brush. So I like brushes that have been like I cut off half the hairs. So
really?
They go like this.
Oh, so you cut them?
Yeah.
You cut them? That's awesome.
Yeah, I cut them. I take scissors and
you frame them.
I frame. Totally frame. And sometimes some brushes are so beat up. I said, "Oh yeah, I used to brush my teeth, dog's teeth with that for a couple of years. So I get that nice special effect on that brush." So those kind of brushes do this are going to give me a different, when I go across they're going to give me like lines and all kinds of misty things. And then with the mediums, as you know, with glazing mediums, you got transparencies that will happen that give you one thing. Then you got different pasto thickening. Mediums it'll stick up on the surface.
So what are some of the mediums that you use?
I use oleopasto. I use Galkid sometimes.
What's the oleopasto?
Oleopasto is it's a medium that when you mix it into any paint, it thickens it up like wedding cake frosting.
It's like a gel, right?
It's like a gel, right? It's not the same as oleo gel. which is that's got the consistency of like
I think it's like silica, right?
And it's kind of if you put it on your palate, it'll sit like this, you know. If you put oleopasto, it sits like
firm.
It sits firm. So it's like firm. It's like it'll take a shape. You can actually shape it if you look at it microwave.
So you're thinking like paint out of a tube, you have transparency. Paint out of a tube, you have opaque. Yeah. That's going to be your early layers, and then you're going to introduce a medium to now get a full body.
Yes, right? Yes, to get a full body, anywhere from a full body to a glazing. But yeah, and then then you take that and you put it on top, those different things on top.
You're kind of raking it. You said with your
frayed
dog brush,
the toothbrush, the dog's toothbrush brush. And then now you got these three elements combining in different ways, right. And man, you get all this rich textures and stuff that happens on the canvas. It's completely exciting. Yeah, you know.
And so when you're doing this, you're actually doing this plein air, right? You paint so fast. So you're out there in 3 hours. You're thinking about you're definitely a chess player because you're thinking about like the opening move, the middle, and then also the end where you can grab that dog toothbrush or the mediums and stuff.
Absolutely. So I'm like I'm gonna sacrifice this pawn on the H file because it opens up the rook file. You know, it opens up the rook later. I'm gonna bring it out and do a rook lift. You know, chess speaking. You know, I'm already in the very beginning. And like a trick. Here's a trick. So I know I'm gonna use the impasto later, right? Right. I'll take it out, let it dry. I'll mix up the 4 different colors with the impasto in it, and it'll sit there for 2 hours. It'll set. So by the time I actually now get it on there, it's firm and it's almost dry. It's almost. So listen to this. So then that's an hour and a half, 2 hours. So that's now on the canvas. I go take a lunch break. I'm doing plein air. And make my phone calls, drink some coffee. I go back, paint another hour or 2 more. That's set now. Yeah. Now I can glaze over it, or I can do something else on top of it.
Interesting.
And that's all one painting session. It's all one plein air painting session. And I've got an impasto texture with a glaze on top. Right. And now I've got these rocks that look like I've spent 10 years on, but they've got 2 layers. Right. And then that'll dry, and I just put little shadows, cast shadows, and all of a sudden it looks like 50 years was spent on it.
So it's almost like to a degree where you're going to go, but there's still the dance. There's still the following the painting and moving with it at the same time. Yeah. And that's kind of, I think, the beauty, right? That's what I always talk about with my students. It's definitely a dance, and it's, but I kind of know what I'm going to do, but I'm not quite sure. Yeah. But you're going to follow where everything's leading you with that idea that, we do want a variety of passive areas and textural moments.
Absolutely.
Cool, man. Well, yeah, I do very similarly. I'll usually start with like a Gamsol layer, just kind of almost like a bird. Tony Ryder said a bird sitting on the edge of a bird drinking to just take a little sip out of it, and I'll add it to thin it out a little bit as my almost nabosh. Even if I'm going to do it in one pass, one sitting like an alla prima, and then I'll go paint out of the tube because now it has a little bit more oil, and rarely will I introduce even more. I'll usually just grab more paint as kind of my third. But it's always thinking of as you're surveying everything that you're looking at, okay, this is gonna I paint a lot of silver, and I always think there's the first pass, which is just the idea of what I visually see, and now second pass for me is I'm trying to capture the silver of the bowl, and then the third is what's the surface, what's that cool surfacey draggy stuff that I can get over the top.
Wow. Yeah. That's the exact same way I do with landscape. That's so fun. It's exactly the same thing. I don't wait. The very end am I worried with the surface.
Right, and I think that's kind of what everyone looks at as the reflections or the tin or the patina of something, or on glass, the streaks of the highlight coming in. But it's kind of no, that's just for me. The last little moment that I think I would watch someone like Travis paint, and then he would always come around, and I'd be like, my painting is a piece of crap. And then he would take my piece of crap and do one small thing to it, and I'm like, he just livened it up. Yeah. And I think those are a lot of the little things that probably help build our confidence of I think I think there's small little moments that we can learn to then bring it to one next step.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, absolutely.
cool, man. Well, look, it's been awesome talking with you. We could talk about this stuff for days.
Yeah.
There will be a lot of visuals in the video too, so I'll try to get all that in there. Do you want to do a magic
let's
trick?
do one magic trick. This is real simple. We have not set this up, right?
No.
You have no idea. Okay.
Nope, that's not my playing cards.
No, these are mine because I have one card that I put in a special way in this deck.
It always gets me every time. We've done magic tricks before, and they're always amazing to see. So let's do it.
All right, I'm gonna snap my fingers, and you're gonna have one card in your subconscious that's face down. You're not gonna know what it is. Okay?
Okay.
Ready? Here we go. Now it's in your head. Let's go get it.
Oh man.
All right. So imagine a pool of water, which is your mind. You're gonna dive in that pool and swim to the bottom of the pool.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's your subconscious. That's where I left that card. At the bottom of the pool, all the cards are face up. Queen of Hearts, Ace of Spades, Joker, they're all face up. But there's one card that's face down. Grab that card.
Mm-hmm.
You take it, swim to the surface of your mind with that card, and take a look at it. What card did we just retrieve from your subconscious?
You want me to tell you?
Yeah,
10 of spades.
right. You see, all the cards, just like in your mind, I'm sure
Oh man.
all the cards are, of course, face up, with the exception of this one here, right?
Oh,
They're
man.
all face up.
Oh,
I put
man.
one of them face down, and that is.
Oh my god. Dude, that's ridiculous. Because I actually was like, I'm going to switch it.
I know, I switched it though, in your
Yeah, I
mind.
know you did. You planted it.
I planted it.
Oh my gosh, that's ridiculous. Well, anyway, now I'm going to be freaked out and think about how you did that magic trick for the next like 2 hours. So anyway, thanks for coming on and talking. It's always a
Absolutely.
pleasure talking, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Great talking with you, Todd.
All right, thanks, man. Awesome, man.
Thank you.
Sweet, and you got plenty of time.
I got
10 minutes.
Take your dog.
Go for it.